So, usually I post stories about random stuff I've done on holiday or at uni, etc. But this is something different. It's been rattling around my head for days, and I think that maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there who knows what I'm talking about, or maybe they've heard something like this before. To those that don't know me, I'm Toby, and I'm currently living on my parents' farm in Wiltshire. To those who don't know Wiltshire, it's an ancient county in the West Country of England. Lots of pre-Roman pagan stuff and all the nasty things that came after. Needless to say, the county has seen a lot of shit, but I digress. Now, during this event, my parents were away and my brother and sisters were also off doing various work or holiday-related stuff. I was at the farm, looking after the place and our dogs, one lab and two Springer Spaniels. Being typical for the region, my parents' land was on open fields with large forest areas dotted all over the place. To get to the house, you had to drive through a long stretch of woodland, which can get very creepy when coming home in the dark. So, we'd had a severe weather warning about a storm that was going to sweep over us during the night. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. Everyone who works here had gone home for the day, and I was coming back from the shops, beer, snacks, and all the Netflix I could watch. I was driving along the dirt road, and I reached a break in the tree line, which looks onto the base of one of the pasture fields. Think bottom of an open hill surrounded by woods. There, just over the top of the hill, was smoke. So I pulled over, hopped over the fence, and made my way onto the field. To my surprise, there's an old woman sat outside her caravan, whittling. Seriously, she was carving up small chunks of wood into what looked like ugly, disfigured Russian nesting dolls. The caravan was one of those old wooden ones, like on Peaky Blinders. Off to one side was a horse, grazing, not paying any attention, and an old dog, a border collie. Bloody hell, I think to myself. I really don't have time to be telling gypsies to hoof it. I know how that sounds, but trust me, any farmer can give you at least one horror story about this exact subject. Anyway, I glance around and it looks as though she's by herself. Hers is the only wagon on the field. Well, that's odd, I think to myself, walking slowly towards the wagon. Is she here all by herself? At this point, my conscience is speaking up. She's out here alone, and I'm basically going to sidle up to this poor old woman and tell her to get lost? Yeah, that's what good people do. I finally reach a few feet from the wagon, but just before I can say anything, the old woman speaks. "I'm not looking to cause you any trouble," she exclaimed in a soft Irish accent. Honestly, she reminded me of my gran. "I just need a place to stay for the night and I'll be out of your hair by morning." I caved. No, I'm not here to move you off," I said guiltily. I don't know if you've heard, but there's supposed to be a huge storm tonight." She said nothing but stopped whittling and lined up 3 small pieces in the dirt. "Those are nice," I said. They weren't, but the silence was awkward. "This creaky bastard is Gnarl," she said suddenly, tapping it with a grubby finger. "This is Rot," she said, flicking a beetle off its splinters. "And this big brute is ELM." "Great," I said. She looked up from her carvings and smiled at me. I continued speaking, not sure if she was completely all there. "Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that you're going to be okay." "Oh, how very kind of you," she said sweetly. "You've no need to worry about me. I'm perfectly prepared for tonight." I was about to respond when a loud symphony of cracks washed over us. It sounded like several trees had fallen in the woods. The wind had picked up, but it didn't feel that strong. The old woman's voice broke through the rising wind. "The woods are unsettled." I turned back to look at her as she scooped up the bits of the carvings. She shrugged. "Could be the storm, could be something else." I never believed in forest spirits or ghosts or anything like that, but I thought I'd just go with it. "Yeah," I commented. "They're putting up that new estate, bunch of IKEA-looking houses. We're going to lose a chunk of woodland, I'm afraid. Government bollocks. It's a damn shame, but that's just how life goes sometimes. Aye, that's how it goes, she sighed. I felt so bad, so I thought I tried to cheer her up. Still, there's plenty of woodland left, and we're not looking to sell any time soon, so that's good. Honestly, that's the best I could come up with on the spot. It seemed to work though, as she continued to smile. Well, I should head home. Make sure the dogs are all right. I offered one final sentence. She raised a hand. Good idea. You get home and keep warm, she responded. I gave her a smile and a nod and turned to walk away. Hold on a moment. Her voice sounded, and so I stopped and turned back around. She was inside the wagon and had opened up a small stove. Reaching in, she dragged her thumb across some of the ash at the bottom. She then proceeded outside and pressed her thumb on my forehead. It was an uncomfortable moment. She removed her thumb, and out of instinct I moved my hand towards my head. No, leave it. She took my hand and patted it reassuringly. Bless you. You're a good boy to an old woman. Now hurry home. Tonight is not a good night for venturing out. Yes. Stay safe. I walked away and gave her one last wave before disappearing over the hill, pondering on whether I'd been blessed or cursed by this gypsy woman. The evening continued. Darkness fell, and the storm arrived. So, my house is an old stone farmhouse, a strong, solid build. Those winds were blasting the living hell out of the place. I was happy though. I had everything that I needed. I was warm, dry, and had a beer, food, and whatever I wanted to watch. I was walking back from the kitchen with a freshly opened beer when I stopped to look outside. The rain was washing over the fields and trees. It was actually quite relaxing to watch. Just as I was about to head back over to the couch and reclaim my seat from the dogs, I saw something. It was faint, but definitely there. It was a small light, like a lantern, I think. It was moving across one of the fields and through the darkness and rain. I wasn't sure what to think at first. It couldn't be any of my family or anyone who works on the farm, as they would have called in or radioed ahead. Then a thought sent a chill down my spine. Is that the old gypsy woman? I considered that perhaps the storm had gotten too much for her, and so she decided to try and find shelter elsewhere. But she wasn't headed towards me. Most of the lights in the house were off, so it made sense that she couldn't see me through the storm. Then the light just disappeared. So, fearing the worst, I made a terrible decision, and I prepared to go after her. I grabbed my jacket, a hat and umbrella, my phone, and a torch. I made sure the dogs were safe, locked the house, and began walking towards the last place I saw the light. I had been drinking, and even though it was on my property and the chances of getting pulled over weren't too impossible, those dirt roads can be very treacherous in heavy rain or thick ice, so I had to walk. I was getting pummeled by the rain, and my torch barely cut through the darkness. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached a spot where I'd seen the light. I quickly scanned the surrounding area. A flash of lightning momentarily illuminated the area. I saw the wagon just over the tree line, and to save time, I decided to cut through the woods. As I dragged myself through the creeping darkness of the trees, I heard what sounded like branches breaking. I stopped and shone my torch into the dense woodlands. There was no light reflecting back, only thick darkness. "Hello?" I yelled, hoping that it was just the storm disturbing the trees. I tried to listen through the rain thumping against the mud. Then, a series of sudden creaks, rhythmic and rather unsettling. I stared at where the sound was coming from, and after another creak, I thought I heard a heavy thump, but this was dwarfed by a great roar of thunder which bellowed around me. Needless to say, I couldn't reach that wagon fast enough. I picked up my pace and splattered through the mud, and eventually I reached a break in the tree line and the bottom of the hill. I climbed the hill, nearly falling face first into the mud several times. But as I reached the top, the wagon was fine. Nothing had keeled over, it was holding strong, and even the horse was under a tent attached to the side, happily munching away as if there was no storm at all. I was about to approach, but then I heard a faint call from behind me. I turned, and as I looked over the trail I'd come from, I could see the light again. It was way back towards the direction of the house, and moving between the trees. I couldn't believe my eyes. Did I walk right past her? I asked myself, raindrops running over my lips. My hat was now soaked and doing very little to keep the rain off my face. Just to be sure, I knocked on the wagon door. No answer. So I started my journey back to the light, which was still faintly glimmering in the distance. I travelled deeper into the woods, and that's when I heard it again. The terrible creaking, slightly muffled by the rain hitting the branches, but I could hear its rhythm. At first, I shone my light on the road and into the density of the woodland, but as I stood still, I noticed something. The creaking was getting louder, and once again I could hear a dense thump following each creak. That's when I realized the sound was getting closer, and it was coming from behind me. The coldness which soaked my skin had crawled up through my bones. Creak, thump, creak, thump, and then silence. I could feel the rain and the wind, but to me it had all fallen quiet. Slowly, I turned my torch at the road behind me, and I couldn't believe my eyes. A matter of feet away from me, standing in the light of my torch, was what looked like a wooden statue. It stood contorted, wrapping one arm across its chest and using the other hand to block its face. I thought I was going crazy. I wiped my eyes with my free hand, but was momentarily blinded by the lashings of rain. I furiously wiped my eyes again, and in the sudden dark I heard a snap. I opened my eyes, hoping it would be gone, but worse. I swear it had moved. Just behind its hand was a glinting yellow light. Panicked, I called out, "Hello?" A moment of silence. Then it moved, taking several sharp, sudden steps towards me, creaking with every step. I fell backwards into the mud. As it approached, a long, creaking motion sounded out as it outstretched the arm from its chest towards me. I slipped and scrambled to my feet and sprinted down the dirt road. Suddenly, it was as if every sound became deafening. The rain shattered on the trees and echoed around me. Thunder raged through the woods, dulling my hearing, and every footstep boomed through the mud and looked to send me crashing back to the floor. No matter how far I thought I was getting, I kept hearing that terrifying creaking. I tried looking over my shoulder, but I lost my footing on a branch that had fallen into the road and fell face first into the mud once again. "Oh, for fuck's sake!" I spat out. My body was frozen from the cold rain soaking through my bones, but my ankle burned in pain. I spun around and looked into the darkness behind me. It was only then I realized two things. The creaking was gone, and I had lost my torch and my phone. I was now surrounded by the darkness of the encroaching woods. I sat still, ignoring the dull pain in my ankle, and as I tried to get my head around what was happening, that nightmarish creaking began to pierce through the winds and the crash of thunder. I staggered to stand, wincing in pain as I began to move. It was closing in. I had no choice. I had to hide. Not wanting to go too far into the woods, I climbed the small mud ledge into the tree line and stayed where I could see the road. The trees moaned around me as if bending and stretching to move over me. I stood still, trying to wipe the rain from my eyes, and instead smearing mud across my face. As the creaking became louder, I saw it through the darkness. That twisted shadow and its sudden, rigid movements, with its arms still outstretched through the dark storm and down the road, as if just waiting for the moment it got close enough to tear my heart from my chest. I stared through cold, stinging eyes as it made its way down the road and disappeared into the darkness. I leant forward against the tree, desperately trying to catch my breath. The old thing groaned as I used my sodden jacket sleeve to wipe the mud from my face. It groaned louder, and so did the others, and with my left hand resting against the bark, I felt it crumble beneath the light weight I had placed on it. I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my jacket. The tree was withering and crumbled before me. In a flash of lightning, I could see the surrounding trees doing the same, just rotting. And then I heard it. A desperate, shallow wheezing on the other side of the tree. I could hear its slow, wet steps splashing around the decaying tree. Long, thin fingers grasped the bark in front of me and pulled a hollow, rotten face into sight. Two empty eyes glared at me, and a wide, open jaw hanged down, with several odd-sized serrated teeth. Its body was grotesque and withered, pieces falling off and regrowing only to fall off again. It suddenly lunged at me, pinning me against the soft bark of the rotting tree. I felt like I was getting pulled inside. I put my hand on its head and chest and pushed with all my strength. Its soft, damp flesh collapsed under the pressure, and I could feel a soft squirming inside. I pushed the creature back and its chest cavity opened, spewing a mess onto the ground. I looked at my hands, and in the darkness I could see all manner of insects and parasites writhing on my skin. I could hear them moving. I quickly brushed them off, and just as the creature turned, I ran back onto the road. I ran and ran. I just had to make it home and I could get my dad's gun from the locker. My ankle was killing me as I stomped through the mud. I got further and further down the road, but in a flash of lightning, I saw the gnarled figure once again. It turned, almost triumphantly at finding me, with one arm still masking its face and the other reaching out. It quickly began those awful, short, sudden movements towards me again. I couldn't be on the road anymore. I would need to take a chance and beat through the fields. I ran through the branches and thorn bushes, nearly tripping over all the crap that amasses on the forest floor. As I finally broke through the tree line and onto the field, I was immediately lashed with the full force of the rain. I was now in the eye of the storm. I trudged and fought my way through the tempest, the thunder deafening me with every roar. At each lightning strike, I would scan my surroundings as quickly as I could. Those things were still out there, and no matter how close, I would never hear them coming. I was so tired by this point I could barely concentrate. All I knew to do was keep moving. But I didn't recognize where I was. I turned, desperately wiping the rain from my eyes and trying to locate my house. I turned, and then, thank God, I saw it. For a moment I felt relieved. I was so close to home and free from this nightmare. But then, the lights went out. What? I spluttered. Where's my... I was cut off by the light reappearing. Then it was gone again, and then on again. Was the power cutting out? Was there someone in my house? The dogs, I stammered, the cold and fear seizing me once again. I couldn't bear to think of whatever was in my house, hurting my dogs. I pushed myself forward towards the light, still vanishing and reappearing. I ran and almost tripped when I felt the ground beneath my feet move. It was like an earthquake, only very brief. I continued slower, but there was another, stronger this time. I stood still. I could hear loud thumps preceding the ground shaking. It got louder and stronger with every passing moment, and I was frozen. Then suddenly it stopped. Thunder raged across the sky, and when the lightning lit up the land, I saw it. A giant hand piercing through the downpour and reaching for me. I jumped out of the way and into the mud. In a moment I heard a loud, low groan. Another flash of lightning revealed the gigantic figure, tall as a building, dark and looming, and staring right at me. Then, everything went dark, and once again, through the darkness, I saw it moving towards me. I rolled over and felt as the dirt gave way to the hand tearing through the soil. Once again the giant groaned, and all I could do was run. With what strength I had, I tried to run past it and towards the house. The growling giant strayed behind me. Maybe it still thought I was close. I made my way further across the fields and closer to my house. I was so close to safety, away from this bewildering nightmare. Everything was so unreal. But as I stepped, I could feel a low shock running through my legs. It resonated in my sprained ankle. The giant was following me. With every step, I felt it get closer, and listening harder, I could now hear the rain tapping against it and echoing towards me. Just when I thought it was going to reach me, I did something stupid. I stopped and stood still. The footsteps shook the earth, and I could feel myself shrinking into the mud beneath my feet. The giant stomped past me, flicking mud up at me, and its massive tree trunk legs tore through the mud. What the fuck was that? A tree? Were all of them bloody trees? What the hell had I been drinking? I shook my head in disbelief and bewilderment. Then, I got angry. The thing continued towards my house. I couldn't let that bloody thing reach home, so once again, I did something stupid. Hey! I yelled, though with all the noise I wasn't sure it could hear me, until the stomping of its footsteps stopped. Over here, idiot! I instantly regret yelling that last part, as a great roar bellowed around me. I turned to run, but my feet were caught in the mud. I could feel the giant getting closer as I struggled to pull my feet free of the mud. I pulled and finally broke free. I stomped through the mud and could hear the giant searching for me. Its great steps and low, hollow growl filled the air. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't keep running. The pain and exhaustion were too much. Out of the corner of my eye came a glimmer of hope. I could see something, and it took me a moment to make out what I was seeing. But there it was, the farm shepherd wagon. I'd almost forgotten that we even had this thing. I dragged myself inside and locked the small wagon door. Crawling away from the entrance, I sat, bunched up, in the center. I was in complete darkness, terrified, waiting for it. Oh God, I've just crawled inside my own coffin. I couldn't stop panicking. Death was coming, and I'd sealed myself away for it. Then I heard it. Through the rain hammering against the wooden shell of my shelter, I could hear the ominous creaking, slowly approaching. I sat, covering my mouth and quietly begging for it just to go away. The creaking stopped, and a loud, terrible scratch tore its way down the outside of the wagon. Then another, and another, as it was trying to tear its way through to me. The wood began to moan as the wagon was rotting around me. It began to shake more and more. I could hear that bloody giant thing approaching. They'd rot through the wood, tear it open, and then tear me open. The shaking got more and more aggressive, and just as it stopped, the wagon began to creak and moan louder. Larger cracks splintered all around me, as if being squeezed. Through one of the larger breaks in the wagon, I beheld that horrifying, glinting yellow eye staring at me. With every scratch down the wall, it never stopped staring. All I could do was cover my head and wait for death. The sound resonated around me, and with one last loud crack, everything fell silent, save for a few drops of rain, which was now entering the holes in the wagon. I didn't move. I sat there and waited, and I couldn't hear the creaking or loud thumping. But I could hear something, faint and comforting, something human. It might have been singing or whistling, but to me, in my fragile state, it sounded like a note, a pitched command. I took what courage I had left and opted to open the door. The dark was slowly leaving, and there was a little light back in the world. I stepped outside, and I was alone. Through the haze I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, save for the brief, distant light slowly fading out of sight. I dragged myself home, limping on my ankle. I honestly couldn't tell you what was going through my head. I was so tired. One moment I was on the field, and the next I'm limping up the gravel driveway, with the sun rising over the hills and fields. I reached the door and kicked something over. I look down, and through tired eyes, I see what looks to be a torch. My torch. And phone. And then next to them, my lost shoe, caked in mud. I picked them up and just stared at them. I scanned the area around my home, and nothing looked out of place. But as I glanced at the gravel leading up to my house, I saw wheel tracks. Now, this could have been anyone, but I think what gives the game away was the pile of horse crap. I'm home. The dogs are fine. In fact, I don't think they noticed that I was gone. After freshening up, I drove over to see if the old woman was still there and found nothing. I can't say for certain what the hell happened that night. I don't know who or what the hell those things were, or even who that gypsy was. But I think I may have interrupted something. Before, everything seemed normal, but after a few days, things started happening. Animals going missing, farm roads and property torn up, workers complaining of driving through the woods at night, something disturbing them. But the worst part, the thing that haunts me even as I write this, is waking up in the night to that damn bloody creaking. Good day, I'm John19, and thank you for listening. Well, Gnarl, rot, and elm should make you watch your step next time you go for a walk in the woods, or need to use a tree. The woods are a wonderful place of incredible natural beauty. That doesn't mean everything that happens there shares that beauty. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then perhaps subscribe, leave a like, and if you're feeling particularly cheeky, maybe even a comment. I do hope that you'll join me again. Stay safe, sleep well, but remember, here we make monsters.